In ancient times, in a distant kingdom nestled among the rolling hills of the east, there was a wise and revered monk named Tenzin. His name was known far and wide, not because of his miracles nor his eloquent speeches, but because of his serene presence and profound silence. Tenzin had taken a vow of silence many years ago, choosing not to speak unless it was absolutely necessary. His calm demeanor and quiet wisdom spoke volumes to those around him. Tenzin lived in a simple monastery at the edge of a vast forest, where he spent his days meditating, tending to his garden, and offering guidance to those who sought him out. People came from distant lands, eager to learn from the monk, to experience the peace that radiated from him. But Tenzin rarely offered words. Instead, he shared wisdom through his actions, through the way he lived, and through his profound stillness. One day, word reached the palace of a mighty king named Rajendra, known for his ambition and pride. King Rajendra was a man of power and influence, with armies that had conquered many kingdoms. Yet, despite his wealth and dominance, he was a restless man, always seeking more land, more gold, more glory. He had heard of Tenzin's reputation for wisdom and sought to test it. The king, though outwardly prosperous, was deeply troubled by an inner emptiness he could not fill. One morning, King Rajendra summoned his courtiers and announced, "I have heard of a monk who speaks little but has the wisdom of ages. I shall visit him and challenge him, for I believe no man, no monk, no being can possess wisdom greater than my own." The courtiers whispered among themselves, unsure of what would transpire, but the king's decision was final. Rajendra mounted his finest horse and set out to find Tenzin's monastery, determined to prove that even the quietest monk could be humbled by the king's greatness. After a long journey through the mountains, the king finally arrived at the monastery. The monk, as usual, was in the garden, tending to the flowers and trees with great care. His peaceful aura seemed to soothe the winds themselves. "Monk Tenzin," Rajendra called out arrogantly, "I am King Rajendra, the ruler of many lands, and I have come to challenge you. I will ask you a series of questions, and if you answer wisely, I will consider you a man of true wisdom. But if you fail, I will have you cast from your peaceful life to show that no man can surpass me." Tenzin, without speaking, nodded calmly and motioned for the king to sit. He then signaled for a servant to bring 2 cups of tea, one for the king and one for himself. The king, still brimming with pride, accepted the tea but kept his eyes fixed on Tenzin, waiting for the questions to begin. With the tea placed before them, Tenzin raised his cup and took a slow, deliberate sip. The king, eager to begin, cleared his throat and asked his first question. "Tell me, Tenzin, what is the greatest treasure in the world?" Tenzin did not respond immediately. Instead, he placed his cup down carefully and stood up. He walked to the edge of the garden, picked a single flower, and returned to the king. Without saying a word, he handed the flower to Rajendra. The king took the flower in confusion. "What does this mean?" he asked. Tenzin finally spoke, his voice soft and steady. "The greatest treasure in the world is not gold or jewels, but the simplicity of life, the beauty of nature, and the stillness within. In your quest for power and glory, you have overlooked the simple treasures that surround you. This flower is a reminder to see beauty in the small, fleeting moments." Rajendra was taken aback. He had expected an intellectual answer, a profound declaration, but the monk's response had unsettled him. However, he was determined to continue and prove himself superior. "Very well," the king said. "Then tell me, what is the secret to true happiness?" Tenzin stood up again, walked over to a tree nearby, and gently touched its trunk. Then he sat down and closed his eyes in meditation. Minutes passed, and still he remained silent, unperturbed by the king's impatience. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Tenzin opened his eyes and said softly, True happiness is not found in seeking it, but in being present with what is. When you stop chasing external pleasures and allow yourself to experience life as it is, you will find contentment. It is in the quiet moments, not in the clamor for more. The king was stunned. His mind raced, trying to understand the monk's words. He had spent his life striving for more, believing that happiness was something to be attained, something to be conquered. But Tenzin's answer made him question everything he had ever known. King Rajendra, no longer sure of his own path, asked a final question. "Monk, if you are so wise, then tell me this. Why is it that a powerful king like me cannot find peace, while you, a humble monk, seem to live in eternal peace?" Tenzin paused for a long time, his gaze steady and calm. He then answered, "The peace you seek, Rajendra, is not in your kingdoms or your conquests. It is in letting go of the need to control everything, of the desire to conquer the world outside. True peace comes from within, from letting go of attachment to your pride, your power, and your possessions. It is the peace of acceptance, of surrendering to the flow of life." The king sat in stunned silence. The monk's words pierced through the layers of his arrogance and ambition, exposing the emptiness within. For the first time in his life, King Rajendra felt the weight of his own inner turmoil. Despite all his power, he realized that he had been chasing the wrong things, thinking that external achievements would fill the void in his heart. And so, after a long pause, the king, humbled and moved by the monk's wisdom, asked, "What should I do now, Tenzin?" Tenzin smiled softly and replied, "Do not search for answers outside. Look within. Begin by embracing simplicity, by letting go of your attachments, and by being present in each moment. True strength lies not in conquering others, but in mastering yourself." From that day forward, King Rajendra returned to his palace, not with a greater hunger for more power, but with a quiet resolve to find peace within himself. He began to meditate, to seek simplicity, and to let go of the desires that had consumed him for so long. Slowly, his heart softened, and he found that the emptiness he had carried for so many years began to fill with a deep, quiet joy. As for Tenzin, he continued his life in silence, tending to his garden and meditating, radiating a peaceful wisdom that spoke louder than words. People from all over the kingdom continued to seek him out, but now they came not to challenge him, but to learn from him. To learn the lesson that sometimes silence holds the greatest wisdom. And so, the story of the silent monk and the powerful king became a legend that was passed down through generations. A reminder that true peace and happiness are not found in external achievements, but in the stillness within.